Welcome to the Sleep Experience podcast, where we take a deep dive into the latest sleep hacks, gadgets, and strategies to skyrocket your productivity to new heights. Being a high performer is all about resting at 100% so you can execute at 100%.
Hey, this is Riley, host of the Sleep Experience Podcast. At the Sleep Experience Podcast, we interview health experts and teach our community how upgrading their sleep is the one thing that they need to unlock their biological code and maximize their performance in an effortless way by doing more with less. Do you want to become a productivity machine, have genius ideas pop into your mind, stop feeling so stressed, build better relationships, and generate more income? Optimizing your deep sleep can do just that. Visit www.thesleepconsultant.com to learn more. My guest today is Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Dr. Justin is a functional medicine doctor working with a variety of patients, all the way from athletes trying to increase performance and heal from injuries to the everyday person with chronic health challenges. Using a holistic health approach, Dr. Justin addresses core underlying health barriers and coach people and his clients to better health, over thousands counting now, and helping them heal faster and feel better. Dr. J, welcome to the show.
Hey, Riley. Good to see you, man. How you been?
Yeah, I've been really great. And it's truly an honor to have you on. You know, you kind of are the one that's sparked this whole journey for me. I think it was around 7 years ago that kind of got me into this whole functional medicine space. And, you know, the results you were able to give to me were just incredible. And I think just speaking from your testimonials, without being biased, I think you're truly one of the best in the world. So it's an honor to have you on today.
Thanks so much, Riley. Really appreciate it. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, and it's really cool to dive in. But first, I really, you know, your approach into health, and I think your journey is an interesting one. You know, you were in Massachusetts, if I wasn't mistaken, you know, studying to become a professional medical doctor. But then you went into the functional medicine approach. So what really got you into the field of functional medicine to begin with?
Well, I think anyone that kind of moves into functional medicine, there's always that kind of conventional mindset of like, we all know allopathic medicine, like MDs are kind of revered in society. Like we've all have experience of taking an ibuprofen when our head hurts or having a drug or an antibiotic for something when you're younger, right? So that's kind of what our typical zeitgeist approach of like, this is what medicine is. But then eventually you start asking questions and you're like, but is this really fixing the root cause? Or, hey, I've been doing this medication for a year now and it's not fixing whatever the ailment is, X, Y, or Z. And then you start looking deeper. And so I just started seeing it in myself personally with chronic health issues, digestive issues, energy issues. I start with patients in the surgical field, especially in the diabetes field, because it kind of ends pretty bad for diabetics, right? I mean, I was there kind of seeing diabetic limbs get amputated. Wow. And these patients, you know, they weren't really interested in making diet or lifestyle changes, or at least the conventional medical field wasn't offering them solutions that are actually going to change the issue. They're going to fix the physiology. So all the conventional MDs just thought they were doing their patients a great service by, you know, it's metformin, glucophage. Okay, now you're on insulin. Okay, that didn't work. All right, now you're getting gangrenous limbs. Now we amputate that. That's the progression. That's it. Yeah. And even the dietitians were giving them, you know, terrible diet recommendations that weren't fixing anything because they're just kind of captured by all the food lobbyists. And so you just keep on asking questions and you try to get to the root, try to go upstream, because you know if you fix the root stuff upstream, then all the symptoms downstream tend to just get neutralized.
Totally, yeah. And I think you're so bang on with that. And that leads me into my other question. What is your overall philosophy to better health? And what do you find is, you know, flawed with the conventional medical industry today, sort of, you know, the politics of it all?
Well, so first off, the insurance model does not give a patient-doctor relationship what it means, right? So number one, they kind of get in between. They're like, the doctor's like, all right, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Patient, and, you know, we're going to have a 1-minute consult. So I really can't talk about much here or even get information about you, what your diet or lifestyle is like. I'm going to make recommendations to you for testing or different recommendations or supplements. And then I'm looking at the insurance guy in the corner. Hey, was this covered? Is that covered? Yeah. So it's like this in between that just kind of creates a wedge between you and the patient. Yeah. And they tend to basically be captured by big pharma as well. So they're going to primarily only cover drugs and surgery. And ideally, in a perfect world, how it would work is you just have insurance for catastrophic issues, a car accident, a crazy cancer, a weird disease, and then everything else is kind of in between, right? And so you should have your insurance just like you would with your car insurance. You never expect your car insurance to pay for new wiper blades, a new headlight, an oil change, even fill up your gas. You never do that. But we kind of have that expectation today with today's insurance model. And ideally, if we just use insurance insurance for where it's good at is catastrophic, high deductible things, and we just use everything else for the in between, then we get optimal choice, because then we're able to find practitioners that work within the philosophy that we want. And most people that are seeking patients, people like me out there, they want to get to the root cause. And so my philosophy is we're making good foundational diet and lifestyle changes. That's the foundation where everything else kind of stacks on top of. If you're making supplement recommendations and people aren't sleeping well, or they're over exercising, or their lifestyle stinks, or their food quality is terrible, it's not going to matter. It's not going to help.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is so on point. And if you're actually getting to the root cause of it, the conventional medical industry is always addressing those surface level symptoms. But if you get to the root cause, then those symptoms don't necessarily have to manifest in the first place. Maybe it's an analogy you use, but it's like a leaking bucket. It's like you can capture that water down below, or you can actually seal the bucket. And now you don't have to capture the water anymore.
Exactly. Just like that. And most people, they kind of come into their MD and they think, well, their MD has to know all these things. Their MD has to know nutrition and functional medicine, but they're making this recommendation because they think this is the best thing. And it's like, well, first off, you have to understand that, the average MD goes to school for 10, 12 years, and they primarily learn a lot about physiology and biochemistry early on. There's not a lot of application to health now. It's to pathology, to a drug, to another intervention that's patentable. It's not to anything nutritional. There's very little nutritional information, supplement intervention. So when someone says, well, my MD didn't recommend this diet change or that, it's like, well, how could they? They're totally uninformed in that. Right? People put medical doctors on a pedestal. It's way too high for anything natural, anything nutritional, any diet, any supplement. They don't know anything about that. They're really good at drugs. They're really good at pathology. They're really good at surgery. They're really good with these acute type of situations. Again, you don't really have to understand the root cause when the issue is acute. If I bang my head, I don't really have to worry about the root cause because it was a one-off isolated issue. I bang my head, it's a one-off, it's done. So now we can address the inflammation, address the pain, and that's it. But the problem with functional medicine is these micro traumas are happening every single day. So you have to fix the root cause, or the drugs are just covering up the symptoms. We know the side effects of medications can be worse over time the longer you ignore the root cause.
Yeah, that's totally on point. So when someone comes to see you today, what is your sequence of operations to helping them get to better health?
Well, it's really important to understand the history. How did this person get here, right? Yeah. Like if someone's 20 years old and they have poor health, well, what was the last 10 years like? Did you have a pretty crappy diet? What was your upbringing like? Did you have a good upbringing? Was it pretty stressful? Or did you have a good childhood? Any major trauma, any major issues? How many servings of antibiotics did you have? What was your interaction with conventional medicine? How many drugs have you been on? So having that history is important. Also, what was your diet like? Did you eat processed food, grains? Did you eat good fats? No fat? Did you eat enough protein, right? So trying to understand what the diet looked like for 10 years, because just because you have a crappy diet, it can take years and years for symptoms to manifest after the fact. And so someone could have a bad diet for 10 years, and that's creating a lot of momentum towards disease. And so understanding that helps. Obviously, we want to change that, but it doesn't go overnight, right? You have 3,000 or 4,000 bad meals in your system. We got to reverse that. Yeah. And then understanding the timing. What's going on? Is there a history of a gut bug, gut infections? Of course, if there's a lot of chronic stress and chronic inflammation, you want to look at those different stress handling systems, whether it's the thyroid or female or male hormones, or the cortisol, adrenal, whether it's neurotransmitters, or whether there's any toxicity that came in between there, whether it's metals or pesticides or molds. You've got to look at all the different inputs that could be driving the symptomatic outputs down the road.
Yeah. I think that's super important, taking that subjective approach, like what is their history like? How do they currently feel? And then also that objective approach and seeing all the lab test kits where they can take like a urine, saliva, or stool sample, like it's sent to their house. Now you have like this whole picture of like what is happening under the hood of their biology. And then from there, you can make like a very scientific approach to all this. And that's how I think you can get better in the fastest way possible.
Yeah. And I like to understand people's intuitions. I think the patient knows a lot about what's going on. Like they may not really be able to crystallize it in clear language, but hey, walk me through your intuition. Like walk me through, hey, you're 20 years old, you don't feel good. Like when do you recall things starting? What kind of stressors were going on in your life? Were there any major setbacks? Like, hey, I went to Mexico, I drank some water, I felt like crap. Hey, I had some major stress in high school and energy and fatigue started happening, or I got mono, or you can kind of get that history and you can really pull some things out. And I think patients know a lot more. They just have a natural inclination about what they think is going on, or at least what was happening when things went sideways. And that gives you a lot of intel.
For sure. Yeah, I think that is all super important, taking that overall model, no matter where somebody comes from, just through that, bringing people through that same sequence of events to helping them get better. It's, the path is sort of all the same. I'm sure you're going to make customized tweaks for each individual, But I love how there's this universal approach that you can take for each person.
Yep, exactly. And also, you don't get that in the 1 minute, 5 minute insurance model. Like just to have patients kind of lay out their history and talk about these things that just, you don't have enough time to really, really dig in and understand what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if that's, sidetracking here more so towards sleep, what happens to the body exactly when we don't get sufficient sleep?
So, I mean, the first thing is when sleep starts to go off, usually there's a circadian rhythm issue. So we naturally have hormonal based rhythms based on light and dark. And so light stimulates cortisol, cortisol stimulates energy, awakeness, and that gives you the ability to be active. And then throughout the day, that cortisol is kind of dropping throughout the day. And then as cortisol drops, there's an inverse relationship with melatonin. Melatonin is a very powerful antioxidant, also a very important sleep hormone. Yeah. And it's made from protein. It's made from amino acids, right? And so that's going to be really important so you can have good sleep throughout the day. Now, if you start to have chronic stress and chronic inflammation, circadian rhythm can get thrown off, and we can be lower during the day where we're more tired and then higher at night and getting a second wind. Chronic stress and inflammation can throw off a lot of our important nutrients like B vitamins and or some of these amino acids. We can burn them up because we're chronically stressed. That can throw off sleep. Yeah. And then, of course, if we're just eating a crappy diet, we may not be getting a lot of those nutrients. Or if our gut function is not ideal, we may not be digesting our protein or absorbing the nutrients, which then can throw off sleep. So it's a combination of stress, circadian rhythm, a lot of nutrient building blocks being necessary for sleep. And then also just the bottleneck of just because you ate it, you got to absorb it and assimilate it. So it's the whole gamut. And then also people think stress is just things that they're perceiving emotionally, like work, family, friends. But you could be on a beach totally meditating and relaxing, but you could have a nasty infection or mold toxicity that is creating internal stress just because it's not an emotional stressor in your environment. It can still be a underlying stressor that's more on the chemical side, if you will.
Yeah, totally. Those hidden internal stressors that people don't know about.
The hidden
ones are really interesting because you're right. Like people meditate, they're eating the right diet and all these other things, but they still don't know why they're experiencing all these issues. And those are like the people that you sometimes deal with. And, that's where you have to roll up your sleeves, put on your gloves, and kind of get to work in the front trenches there. But that's what's amazing is you're actually seeing that clinical data with people.
Bingo. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. What are some application things? What would you say are like the 5 more advanced tips that you can give to people to improve their sleep quality beyond just, like blackout bedroom, cooler bedroom environment temperature, whether it's supplements, gadgets, techniques, strategies, anything that are your top 5 favorite? Yeah.
So you gotta rise and fall. You got to wake up and go to sleep with the sun. That's going to be key. Yeah. So I recommend if you're having sleep issues, you may just have to rip the cord and just wake up at sunrise just to get that circadian rhythm going. Even though you may want to sleep till noon or 1 because, hey, you can finally sleep and it's 5 a.m. I recommend really getting up with the sun, grounding in the morning. Letting your eyes, letting that sun hit you, right? Really getting good. You can even use stimulation for cold as well. Cold in the morning, cold at night. These things can be very helpful with resetting the HPA axis, getting that good light in the morning. You really got to reestablish that rhythm. Now, adaptogens can be very powerful with that as well. And so we'll test what someone's circadian rhythm looks like. We'll actually look at it so then we can use certain adaptogens and nutrients at certain times. We'll look at the neurotransmitters that are the building blocks for the sleep hormones. We'll use different nutrients as well that promote relaxation and activate the parasympathetic nervous system, whether it's magnesium, whether it's theanine, whether it's GABA, whether it's ashwagandha. Those are good, whether it's just really getting your rhythm kind of restarted in the morning, whether it's melatonin or 5-HTP and B6, all these things can be powerful. There's a lot of recommendations that are very general. Typically the testing and the person's history and what they're going through kind of allows me to really fine tune the recommendations though.
Got it. Yeah. Those are all super, super important. Love it, Dr. J. We could talk for hours about all this stuff, but as the last question I like to ask all of my guests, any last words of wisdom for our listeners before we close out today?
Yeah. So I look at, everything and I say, okay, what's the foundation, right? Get your food right, get your circadian rhythm right, get your sleep environment right. From there, you can, work on some simple lifestyle strategies, whether it's cold showers at night, grounding, getting up with the sun. whether it's Epsom salt foot baths at night, just things to kind of get your body kind of more relaxed, more chilled out. But then after that, if you're not where you want to be, or there's still, you feel like there's some room to improve, that's where you want to find a good functional medicine practitioner, functional medicine doctor that can do a little bit of testing and really get things granularized and nuanced to what you need. And so the testing really helps. So kind of getting a good functional medicine provider, if someone needs to reach out to myself, my staff's available worldwide, justinhealth.com. You can reach out and we can kind of look at all the things that you've done and what's the next step above and beyond to kind of get you to the next level. So figure out something that you can execute on from this podcast. And then once you kind of maximize it, then take it to the next level.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I learned a ton today, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. So I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks a lot, Riley, for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you would like to learn more about how sleep can benefit your personal or business life, visit thesleepconsultant.com. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Sleep Experience podcast. We'll see you next time on next week's episode. Be sure to subscribe and follow us to get future updates on everything sleep, energy, focus, stress, and better performance.